Hello everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing A Clockwork Orange. This is a classic film directed by Stanley Kubrick and it came out in 1971. And yes, I am wearing orange for this occasion because I am that cliche of a person. Stanley Kubrick was a very famous, very notorious, controversial film director, but also a highly respected artist by the time the early 1970s came around. He had really found his style, his point of view, and that niche in terms of experimentation, especially after 2001. 2001, I feel like, is his magnum opus, where he really reached the peak of his creativity and thoughtfulness as a creator. And all the films he did after that in his career definitely have that 2001 experimental feel to them, in that, you know, it seemed like he had free reign in his work. Everything had a very unbridled, very brash feel to it. It's as if he's saying, you know, like, fuck you to the system, fuck you Hollywood. And A Clockwork Orange is a huge fuck you, not only to Hollywood, but just to, you know, the world in general. It's very social and politically aware compared to 2001, which is much more of like a meditative experience, very cosmic experience. But A Clockwork it's very bizarre, it's kooky, it's ugly, it's an offensive film to some people. It was extremely scandalous when it originally came out, and it continues to be one of those films that definitely gets a rise out of people. And I think that that's for good reason, because it is a film that either you're going to be disgusted by or you're going to recognize the very cheeky, very conscious nature of what it's trying to say about the world. It has a lot of shock value and violence. Even for this day, some people are still a little bit put off by it, some of the things that you see in the film, but it's pulled off in very clever, very satirical ways. This film to me reminds me a lot of kind of that artistic movement like Dadaism, because it is an exploitive art piece. It's a statement about our morals and how they are slowly declining in this dystopian future. This film is about a bunch of juveniles, a bunch of teenagers in a gang that is called the Droogs. They are led by a teenager named Alex DeLarge, and he is also the main character. This film tackles so many different themes, and it's very ambitious, and Kubrick, to me, has always been able to tackle these themes as a visual creator. To me, he's much more of a visual artist, and so in this film in particular, it had lots of heavy imagery in it. Even just, I mean, particularly in the opening shot, which is a spectacular, very, very memorable shot where you have all the Droogs at a milk bar that they frequent, and as the camera zooms out, you see all of these mannequins, and they're all very, very objectified. And it's like in every frame you see some sort of symbolism of what the film is trying to convey as a whole. I mean, just in the graffiti that you see on kind of murals, very electronic, very faux quality of the music. I mean, there's a lot of classical music used in this film, but on occasion they'll use synthesizers as the instruments, so it gives it just that very weird feel. All of this is serving the very satirical nature of the film, but I think that it's satirical because there's not a moment where I feel as though Kubrick wants us to take anything that he's doing seriously. He wants us to always be conscious of the fact that we are watching a film, that it is a production. And this is a constant throughout all of his work. He always uses the camera as the very cold, very still, distant observer. He uses this really well in the rape scenes as well as some of the more violent scenes, because it makes you feel so uncomfortable, because it's like you're just kind of watching the action and you can't do anything about it. And I also like the fact that I mentioned that he uses a lot of classical music, and some of it's like synthesized classical music, but a lot of it is also just the real music. You hear all kinds of different great pieces in there, and I like the way that you've got this beautiful, beautiful music that's meant to be so artful and moving, and you're kind of juxtaposing it with a lot of the things that are happening on screen. So it's like that juxtaposition of art and all of these very heathenistic actions. You're mixing the art with the sexuality and the violence and the politics, and it makes you ask the question, you know, what is exploitation and what is the art? I mean, the lines blur often, and Kubrick very consciously is doing that. And the main character of Alex is played with very sly, very kind of dark humor by Malcolm McDowell, and he's just perfect in this film. The character that he plays is just a representation of the very demonic nature of human beings and what they are capable of. I mean, he's a teenager living in what seems like a middle-class, very kind of quaint family. He has all of the tools to become a very ethical, very successful young man, but he's evil. He rapes women and tortures whoever he feels like, and he lives life without any consequences at all. And obviously, this kind of behavior can only go so far. Eventually, his exploits escalate into murder, and he is caught and sent to the penitentiary. It's here that we see the establishment, the symbol of totalitarianism, take over. Once he's convicted, Alex is convicted, you know, they all view him as this hoodlum that is beyond help. So basically they try to brainwash the evil out of him by using what they call like behavior modification techniques. Here, the commentary is extremely obvious in terms of the way that Kubrick, not only Kubrick, but also the author of the book, Clockwork Orange, how they view the system, how often the kind of right-wing oppressors are so hell-bent on forcing people to think a certain way, rather than truly trying to understand and address the problem of what comes from juvenile delinquency. It's about turning everybody into these zombies, conditioned by their system, by their religion, by their politics, and their entertainment, which to me is what is most powerful, especially because A Clockwork Orange is meant to be a film, what most people see as entertainment. And it's at this point that Alex becomes the kind of the sympathetic anti-hero rather than the villain. But you know, I was never emotionally tied to Alex as a character, but I don't think you're really meant to be, because you know, he's not a complex character. This kind of pathos that they add to the film doesn't connect with me, and I find it slightly shallow. And that's kind of my problem with A Clockwork Orange. When I was younger, when I saw this movie as a teenager, I thought it was the shit. I just thought it was so amazing and creative, and it affected me on such a deep level. And the older I get, I don't get as much out of it. I'm not as compelled by it. I think that Kubrick did a better job as a creator of mixing that humor, but also adding human complexity in a lot of his earlier work. When he got to a certain point in his career, he started to kind of neglect that side of it. And, you know, I still love a lot of the films that came after 2001: A Space Odyssey, but I always recognize that there's something missing. Like, you know, The Shining. I have my problems with that. I reviewed that on this channel a couple years ago, I think. And Barry Lyndon. One of my top 10 favorite films. I love that movie, but I recognize that there is something about it that leaves me cold. And that's totally intentional, and I get that. You know, these films are meant to be more conceptual, more creative in ways that study society from a distance, almost as if we're looking at society through a microscope. It's meant to be almost clinical. But I think even in a satire, when ideas and characters are meant to be very exaggerated, I still think it's important to have characters that really have dimension, that are fleshed out. So that way we're not only examining the concepts, but we're also kind of experiencing them through the characters in complex ways that we can relate to. And I just don't get that from this film. There's something about it that I feel is missing. But I still think that everyone that's a film fan should see it if you haven't, because, I mean, first of all, it's a Stanley Kubrick film, and anything that he does is worth watching over and over and over again, even if you don't like it. Because even if you don't like it, there's so much to talk about and to think about and to argue about. And this film fits right along with it. It is such a unique experience, something that you will never forget. It definitely stays with you. It may not resonate with you, but I mean, there are so many images and things that happen that are very different. And the way that it handles these themes in such a creative way is just really cool. I've never seen anything like it before. I know people have tried to emulate a lot of Kubrick's style and ideas that you see in Clockwork Orange, but nowhere near to the level that he's been able to create that certain tone. Because, I mean, just as an artist, as a master of the cinema, Kubrick just came out of nowhere. He was just this guy who had no formal training, but he had this vision that was so unlike anything else. I mean, his films, I don't even think they belong in genres. All of his films should be just one subgenre on their own, because they are so, they stand on their own. While I do take issue with certain things in his films, and I do have my own opinions particularly about this film, I totally understand that somebody else could come in and completely refute everything I have to say and do it in a totally justifiable way. A Clockwork Orange is still just a fascinating piece of work, and I really do admire it because it not only criticizes the culture, but it's also a part of the entertainment that criticizes the culture, if that makes any sense at all, because it affects masses and masses of people. And if you think of it in that way, then I think it achieved everything it set out to do. It examines art in a way that is completely original in terms of vision. And so, yeah, why not check it out if you haven't already? And that is my review. Thank you all for listening. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, the link is below. And you can also like my Facebook page and the link below that one. Catch you next time.